Hey, AP Lang teachers. As the beginning of the school year approaches, I wanted to put together a video for you with 5 different activities that you could do to start off your year in AP Lang. If we haven't met yet, my name is Beth Hall. I go by Coach Hall Writes on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And my mission is to help AP Lang teachers empower their students to write effective rhetorical analysis essays. Now, I love synthesis and argument too, but rhetorical analysis is my absolute fave. And by the way, apologies in advance for the quality of my voice right now. I've been dealing with some hardcore allergies, so I sound really stuffy. One of the most commonly asked questions that I receive is, what should I start with? Which FRQ should I start with first? Personally, I start with rhetorical analysis. We spend about 9 to 12 weeks on this, depending on how many interruptions there are. And by interruptions, I mean things like fire drills that are inevitably scheduled during my AP Lang class, or random days when there's field trips and the kids aren't in school. Although most of my students come into AP Lang with a little bit of rhetorical analysis knowledge from Honors 10, I have found that rhetorical analysis is the one that is the most difficult for them and it takes the longest for them to grasp. So we start with that and then we actually revisit it in the second semester. After rhetorical analysis, we move on to synthesis. I like to spend almost an entire marking period on synthesis because my students really seem to like having the sources. It really helps them understand how to construct an argument. They find question 3, the argument essay, the most difficult, and so I save that for the beginning of the second semester. Because they've already had synthesis instruction, while it's still a challenge to come up with their own evidence for Q3, it is a little bit easier. And I think because of that, I can spend less time on Q3. Another reason why I put Q3 in our second semester is because most of my students take either American history, APUSH, or world history. And so by January, they've had a semester worth of knowledge from those classes. And so they're better able to draw on historical evidence. Also, because of the text that we talked about for rhetorical analysis and synthesis, they're more informed about current events and things like that. And like I said, we revisit rhetorical analysis, and multiple choice is something that we kind of just do ongoing throughout the entire year. Now, I want to be clear, just because I approach the year this way does not mean that I think everybody should. In fact, I know some amazing teachers who have tremendous success and they start with either argument or synthesis first. I think it depends on your preferences, the group of students that you have, and just your overall approach to the course. In my personal opinion, as long as you have covered all 3 FRQs, you are okay. There are compelling arguments for a variety of ways to organize the course, so do what makes the most sense for you. All right, now for the real reason that you're here, let's talk about some activities that you can use to introduce some of these concepts. So, for those of you who intend to start with rhetorical analysis like I do, one activity that I like to do is a commercial analysis. Commercials are really short, and so it's a great way to introduce concepts such as the rhetorical situation and also rhetorical choices. I'll include a list of a couple recommendations in the description box below. It's not an inclusive list, it's just a starting point, but please review the commercials before you choose to assign them. Personally, I really like Nike commercials because I feel like those tend to have a very clear rhetorical situation, and the way they put them together, students are able to pick up on some of the choices that they made as far as the filming as well. If you are not starting rhetorical analysis until January, you might consider having your students analyze a Super Bowl commercial. That can be a pretty fun assignment. Honestly, you could do Super Bowl commercials at any point in the year. My advice would be to make sure that there is a clear message, argument, or purpose and a clear audience. That way, students can start to analyze that rhetorical situation. Check out the description box below for more information about how you could possibly do this assignment. By the way, if you're watching this video when I upload it, I will be doing a live training here on YouTube July 6th, 7th, and 8th. And as a thank you for attending that live training, I will be giving you even more access to my commercial analysis activity. I'll include a link to sign up for that in the description box below. That way you can get reminders. Another great way to get reminders for that, though, is to just make sure that you are subscribed with the notifications turned on. Another activity that you can do at the beginning of the year is to have your students write a summary. Usually, if I have students do this, it's a summary of an article or possibly another text. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, I thought they were supposed to be analyzing or arguing. Why are we having them summarize? This can be a great way to understand your students' writing abilities and also their comprehension. What I like to do is give them a passage and time them, usually for, let's say, 10 minutes, to have them write a summary. I tell them that it's a completion grade and I know they're not going to finish. Because let's be honest, usually with AP Lang, we have some perfectionist students. And one of the things that I like to do is to offer different timed assignments that start to simulate a little bit of the exam pressure. It's still low stakes, but I want them to get used to being timed for different writing assignments. Once students have spent about 10 minutes writing their summary, I will then let them either peer edit or revise. When they do that, I want them to think about their word choice and their syntax. So I have them go back and look at their verbs to make sure that they're using strong verbs. I might ask them to go back in and insert adjectives or adverbs. Depending on their background knowledge, I might also ask them to incorporate more advanced punctuation. So, for instance, if they already know how to use semicolons or colons or dashes, I might ask them to try to go put that in there. Now, not all students come into class knowing the proper way to use that punctuation. So, that's one of those things where you kind of have to decide, is that requirement a good fit for your class? But like I said, summaries are a great way to learn about your students' writing style, and typically it's a skill that they already have. They might not necessarily know how to analyze, at least not to the degree that we expect. That's what we teach them, but presumably they have some experience writing a summary. Who are interested in introducing either argument or synthesis, you might consider mini debates. Personally, I try to choose very student friendly topics that are not controversial. So, some topics that I've used in the past are things like, is a hot dog a sandwich? How should a giraffe wear a tie? If you Google this, there's a picture and there's two options. There's also one about, how should cats wear pants? Other ideas might be things like, which restaurant has the best fries? My students have some really strong opinions on this. Also, I've seen different posts on the different Facebook groups about things like, which snack cake is the best or which cereal is the best. So I can't claim credit for those ideas, but if you're looking for more information, definitely go check out the AP Language and Composition teacher groups. You can go to the search bar and type in something like cereal smackdown or snack cake debate, and it should pop up in the files. Now, I did look through the archives and I couldn't figure out who was the first person to post about either one of those, but they are pretty popular activities. So if you're the original poster of either the debate for snack cakes or cereal, please reach out to me and let me know, and I would be happy to update that information in the description of this video to give you credit. Now, this last question might not be one that applies to everybody. I teach in a pretty rural town. So, one of the questions that my students greatly debated was, if we were to add a new restaurant to our town, what should it be? Now, if you teach in a big city, this might not be as interesting of a question, but perhaps you could ask something like, if we were to add a new class to our school, what should it be? Building off of the idea of mini debates, you could also do speed debating, which, yes, sounds like speed dating. If you're not comfortable using that term, you might call it something like the gauntlet. But the idea is that you select a series of pretty friendly debate topics and you set up your desks or tables in a row, kind of like speed dating, so that the people are facing each other. So you want to make sure that there are pairs where they're looking at each other, and you can print off the question that they're supposed to debate and stick it in the middle of the two students. You're going to want a different question for each pairing, and you could set up the parameters for how you want to do this. You might give each side a minute to debate and then have them rotate. This can be a great way to build a sense of community, especially at the beginning of the year, because if you have students rotate, they're getting to know more students. And if it's just really non controversial topics, it can be kind of fun and entertaining, and it's also accessible. And if you, as a teacher, are able to listen in and observe how they defend their position, that'll give you some pretty important information about their argument skills. For those that are starting with synthesis, I really like the synthesis dinner party activity as a way to teach students how to put the sources in conversation with each other. Now, again, I want to be clear, there are files for this in the different Facebook groups. This is not my own original idea, but it is one that I have found to be very successful with my students. And it's one that I think teachers can adapt to their students' needs very easily. So if you are not a part of those Facebook groups, definitely join them because there are a ton of resources there. That being said, sometimes as a new AP Lang teacher, there might be so many ideas that it's kind of overwhelming to figure out where to start, which is why I wanted to create this video. The idea behind a synthesis dinner party is that students will have read the synthesis sources. Usually it's either 6, 7, or 8 sources. Most of the prompts I use, I think, just somehow tend to have 6 sources. So you might have the students read and annotate them, but they are definitely familiar with the sources. What you do is you give them a template that kind of looks like a dinner party table. When I do it, there's usually a box in the middle, and I have them restate the prompt in the form of a question. And then if there are 6 sources, there are 6 boxes around that center box to kind of make it look like the different chairs at a table. Now, my students have not necessarily been to formal dinner parties, but they have been to family gatherings. And so when I explain the concept of a dinner party, how you're trying to seat the guests, which in this case are the sources, you want to make sure that you're putting people, or in this case, sources, near sources that they would get along with. So that means you want to take sources that are very opposite and stick them on opposite ends of this table because you want to keep the sources that don't agree with each other far away from each other. And usually I'll get a student who makes some kind of comment like, "Oh yeah, like my dad and my Uncle Joe," or something like that. So that's how I have them start. I usually encourage them to choose the sources that are going to sit at the ends of the table, the furthest away from each other. And then they fill in the other sources. And so as they're figuring out where to seat the other sources, they need to think about overlap. So do these two sources build off of each other in any kind of way? Are they similar in terms of their topic? Are there talking points that they have in common? Because at a dinner party, you want the guests to have civil conversation. Now, when I assign this to my students, I usually let them work in either pairs or groups of 3. And usually, as I'm walking around the classroom, I hear some really great conversations about why they should seat certain sources in a particular spot. To extend the activity a little bit, I have them write a paragraph in which they explain to me how they came up with their seating chart. So, why did they put the sources in the order that they did? And this is something that you can do on paper or you can do it on Google Slides. For my students, it doesn't necessarily take a full class period. Our class periods are 45 minutes, but it does take up usually at least half of the class period, especially if I'm letting them write the paragraph in class. So I would say, depending on your students, I would budget anywhere from like 25 to 40 minutes for them to create their seating chart with the sources and also write the paragraph if you want them to do that extension. And as far as grading goes for that, honestly, I usually give it a completion grade. The last activity I want to mention is one that is very popular. Admittedly, I haven't assigned it to my own students, but I have a couple students that I have tutored in the past that have done this with their AP Lang teachers and they enjoyed it. And that is the high school drama synthesis. So this is from the amazing minds of Tim Freitas and Katie Storms. So if you've been researching AP Lang at all, you probably already have heard of Tim, but in case you haven't, definitely go check out his channel, which is The Garden of English. He has some amazing content, and he and I sometimes team up and collaborate for different events, especially leading into the AP Lang exam. But the high school drama synthesis is a great way to teach students the basics of synthesis. It's very student friendly. As the name suggests, it deals with high school drama. So it's a way to take those skills in a somewhat non academic way, if you will. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but it's a very approachable way for students to think about how to synthesize information and, in some sense, sort of apply the skills to real life, if you will. So, anyway, if you are interested in looking at that activity as a way to introduce synthesis, I will include a link to it in the description box below. Now, before you go, do me a favor and leave a comment on this video and let me know what your favorite beginning of the year activities are. Or if you're a newbie AP Lang teacher and you have a question about teaching AP Lang, go ahead and leave me a comment about that as well. Also, just as a friendly reminder, please be sure to check out the description box below. There you will find links to some of the resources I mentioned, as well as some other resources that will help you as you navigate the wonderful class that is AP Lang. Until next time, happy teaching!